Today we're going to talk about why Khrushchev should never be trusted with corn. So for those of you who don't know, Nikita Khrushchev was leader of the Soviet Union from 1953 to 1964, and he had some pretty controversial policies. Most notable of these was de-Stalinization. Basically, he wanted to make his Russia less like Stalin's Russia. Stalin was the previous leader, and I'm going to make a wild assumption and say you know who Stalin is. De-Stalinization was controversial. So were other policies. So controversial, in fact, that he was removed from the party in 1964. It was unpopular for a number of reasons. He lost Russia a lot of money, and his international policies weren't very popular. Also, he was a lot more flexible than Stalin, which made him look somewhat weak. But who doesn't look weak compared to Stalin? I mean, the guy took a machine gun to the gut and then escaped from a death camp in Siberia. Siberia! Also, Khrushchev was from a poorer background, and often the other members of the party would call him a simple farm boy because he was from a part of Russia called the Ukraine, which is mainly used for farming. This shouldn't really matter in a true communist society where everyone is equal, but it kind of did. So what does all this have to do with corn? Well, you see, in the 1940s, a man called Roswell Gast travelled around Europe spreading his ideas about corn. He was an international agriculturalist and wanted to sell different farming techniques to different countries. He went to Chile, France, Germany, Hungary, and the USSR. Khrushchev was so impressed with Gast's techniques that he eventually went to the US and looked at all of their finest corn farms. Whilst going around the farms, he chatted to Gast about farming techniques, because apparently they were friends now, and the US treated him to a meal made almost entirely of corn. There was corn bread, corn chowder, corn-fed beef, and of course, corn. Khrushchev's plan was to start growing lots of corn in Russia. And when I say lots of corn, I mean lots of corn, like enough to feed 182 million people. You see, Russia had been an important grain from capitalist countries, and had then been keeping its own grain and not been able to sell it to make more money. Demand for food was so great that many farmers were executed for not giving all of their food to the USSR, and many prisons were also using their political prisoners as slaves to turf the land. Khrushchev was quoted as saying, "There will be no communism if our country has as much metal and cement as you like, but meat and grain are in short supply." He wanted to make the USSR independent of all nutritional aid, make it a totally self-sufficient socialist state. Russia could have stopped relying on other countries, and it could have stopped pumping money into the capitalist economies that it was fighting against. It could have risen to an unparalleled position of power and possibly altered the course of the Cold War. In 1954, Khrushchev started the Corn Campaign. He sent out promotional corn adverts, a corn institute was established in Ukraine. A corn pavilion was opened at the All-Union Agricultural Exhibition. The Ministry of Agriculture even issued that a scientific journal was going to be produced entitled Corn. Just corn. Corn was planted on farms in place of already existing crops, and new corn farms were being made in places that had never even grown food before. This was called the Virgin Land Scheme. Everything was looking good. Sown acreage of corn rose from 4.3 million hectares in 1954 to 18 million hectares in 1955. That's a lot of corn. In an attempt to grow as much corn as possible, Khrushchev started expanding to new areas. Even though Gast had warned him only to grow into the most southern parts, he started going out of those. He started expanding his already existing corn farms and building even more. By 1962, total acreage had increased to 37 million acres. People thought that Mr. Corn had done another agricultural miracle. Then it happened. A winter of disastrous proportions swept across Europe. It ruined houses, livestock, and crops. Strange weather patterns formed all over Russia, making the hot parts cold and the cold parts uninhabitable. About 20% of the farms were able to harvest their grain, and the other 80%, well, they weren't so much farms as large piles of dead corn. This led to a famine and millions of rubles being lost on importing grain just to keep people alive. This was exactly the kind of thing which the Corn Campaign had been made to stop. Khrushchev was seen as a fool, and now the nickname Mr. Corn, which had once been used so lovingly, became an insult for the Soviet leader. He became despised by his people and other members of the party. This was one of the main reasons for his expulsion from the party in 1964. Hatred for Khrushchev and his corn went on even after his death. Many parts of the Ukraine and southern Russia still refused to plant corn, and Khrushchev himself was given an experimental modern art tombstone, even though he often publicly said how much he hated modern art. In In a recent poll of young Russians, Khrushchev was shown to be the only modern leader of Russia who was not universally hated. Every other leader was marked down as doing more harm than good. Except for Khrushchev, opinions on him were divided. So what do you think? Was he an overambitious fool who gambled away Russia's financial security? Or was he just a poor farm boy who wanted to share his love of corn with the world?